Rainwater dripped from the edge of the small balcony, tapping against rusted iron railings like a heartbeat that wouldn't stop. Inside apartment 3B, Maria Santos stood frozen, one hand gripping the doorknob, the other trembling against her chest. Her eyes were red and swollen, not from sleep, but from the hours she had spent crying quietly, afraid to make a sound. Down the hallway, footsteps echoed. The sound of boots, firm, rhythmic, deliberate. Then came the knocking, 3 hard raps that seemed to shake the entire doorframe. "Mrs. Santos?" a voice called out. "Manila Police. We need to ask you a few questions." Maria didn't answer at first. Her throat felt locked. Behind her, the dim apartment was a portrait of stillness. Unwashed dishes, a flickering fluorescent bulb, and on the couch, a single child's shoe. "Mrs. Santos?" The knock came again, sharper this time. She inhaled, slow and broken, before opening the door halfway. 2 officers stood there, their rain-soaked jackets dripping onto the tile floor. Between them, Detective Ramos, calm, composed, eyes sharp but not unkind, studied her face. "Are you Maria Santos, mother of Angela Santos?" he asked. Maria nodded faintly. "Yes, Angela's my daughter." "Is this about her? Did you find her?" Her voice cracked at the last word. Ramos exchanged a look with his partner. "Can we come in, ma'am?" Maria hesitated, as if allowing them inside would somehow make everything real. But she stepped back, opening the door wider, the smell of damp air mixed with something faintly sour, the kind of scent that clings to grief. One officer took notes while Ramos gently scanned the room, his eyes catching small details. Children's drawings taped on the wall, a pink school bag near the table, unopened milk cartons in the kitchen. "When was the last time you saw your daughter?" Ramos asked. Maria pressed her fingers to her temples. 2 days ago. She was here, watching her cartoons. I went to the market. When I came back, she stopped, her breath stuttering. She was gone. Ramos leaned slightly forward. You didn't report her missing until today? I thought maybe she went to her father's house, Maria whispered. Ernesto. He sometimes takes her without telling me. Ramos noted the name down, his pen scratching softly. And where is Ernesto now? I don't know. Her eyes flickered toward the curtained window. We don't live together anymore. Outside, thunder rolled, distant but heavy, like the sky itself was holding its breath. The second officer's radio crackled, static hissing through the silence. Ramos turned it down and looked back at Maria. Mrs. Santos, we'll need to ask you some more questions at the station. Routine procedure. Maria blinked rapidly, panic rising in her chest. Am I in trouble? Ramos shook his head gently. We just want to find Angela. But as he spoke, his eyes lingered, just for a moment, on the faint discoloration near the base of Maria's nails, the kind that soap never fully removes. Maria caught his gaze and quickly tucked her hands into her sleeves. Please, she said softly, just find my baby. Ramos nodded, signaling to his partner. The two officers stepped outside to make a quick call. Maria closed the door, leaned against it, and slid down to the floor. Her breath came in sharp bursts. Behind her, the apartment seemed to hum. The refrigerator's low buzz, the rain against the glass, the echo of her daughter's laughter somewhere in her mind. She reached for the small pink hair clip on the table, clutching it until her palm ached. Outside, through the door's thin wood, she could hear Detective Ramos speaking into his radio, his voice calm, procedural, but Maria didn't catch the words. Her eyes had drifted toward the corner of the room, where a faint trail of muddy footprints led from the doorway to the kitchen, then disappeared into silence. Her tears came again, quiet but endless, as blue and red lights from the police car flashed through the window. By the time Ramos knocked once more, Maria had already stood up, wiping her eyes. This time, she opened the door without hesitation. "Detective," she whispered, voice trembling. "I'll tell you everything." The small interrogation room smelled faintly of old coffee and wet uniforms. A single fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting a pale glow across Maria's face. She sat at the metal table, hands clasped, eyes hollow. The same tears from earlier had dried into pale salt lines across her cheeks. Detective Ramos closed the door quietly and sat across from her. He set a small recorder on the table and pressed the red button. A faint click echoed in the room. "Maria," he began softly, "you said you last saw Angela 2 days ago. Tell me again what happened that day." Maria nodded, her voice fragile. It was a normal morning. She was coloring on the floor. I told her to wear her pink dress because we were going to church later. I went to buy rice and fish from the market. When I came back, the door was open. Her eyes darted toward the floor as she spoke. I called out her name, but she didn't answer. I checked every corner, even under the bed. She was gone. Ramos leaned back slightly, watching her body language, the twitch in her fingers, the way her voice trembled only on certain words. "Did you notice anything unusual in the days before she disappeared?" Maria hesitated. "Her father came by last week. He wanted to see her. He said he missed her." "Ernesto Santos?" Ramos clarified. "Yes." Her tone stiffened. "We've been separated for months. He had a temper. Angela was scared of him sometimes." Ramos nodded slowly. "Did he ever threaten you or your daughter?" Maria's lips parted, but no sound came out. After a moment, she whispered, "He used to shout a lot. Break things. Once he grabbed her arm too hard." Her voice cracked on the last sentence, a mother reliving what she had tried to bury. Ramos wrote something down in his notebook, then spoke gently. "Maria, I need to ask. Do you think Ernesto could have taken Angela?" Maria looked up sharply. "I don't know," she said, shaking her head. "He always said she was better off with him. Maybe he did." The detective nodded again, hiding his skepticism behind a neutral expression. He'd heard that tone before, the voice of someone both protecting and fearing the same person. Ramos switched tactics. "Can we have permission to search your home and the surrounding areas?" Maria swallowed hard. "You can search whatever you want. I just want her back." The door opened briefly as a uniformed officer stepped in, whispering something to Ramos. The detective's brows furrowed slightly. He turned back to Maria. "Some of your neighbors reported a strong odor near your storage area in the basement. Do you keep anything there?" Maria blinked. "Just old clothes and boxes from when we moved." Ramos nodded, his tone calm but eyes sharper now. "We'll have a look." "It's probably nothing." She forced a small, nervous smile. "Yes, probably nothing." The recorder clicked off. Ramos stood, giving her a brief nod before stepping out. Left alone, Maria exhaled shakily. Her hands, still trembling, found the edge of the table and gripped it hard. Outside the door, muffled voices exchanged orders. A radio crackled, words indistinct, but one phrase cut through clearly. "Check the basement storage, Unit 3B. Maria's face went still. Her pulse quickened. The faint hum of the light above her seemed louder now, sharper, almost taunting. Her eyes filled with tears again. But this time, they weren't for Angela. The basement of the apartment complex was dim and stale, lit by a single flickering bulb that buzzed like a trapped insect. Dust floated through the air, dancing in the weak light. The concrete floor was damp, and the smell, faint but sharp, grew stronger with every step the officers took. Detective Ramos led the way, his flashlight cutting through the gloom. The maintenance worker followed behind, nervously clutching his cap. "Sir," he said quietly, "that smell started a few days ago. I thought it was just rats, or maybe spoiled food." Ramos didn't respond. He stopped in front of Unit 3B, the small metal storage door labeled in faded paint. A faint buzzing could be heard inside, flies trapped and angry. "Whose unit is this?" he asked. The maintenance worker swallowed. "Belongs to Mrs. Santos, Maria." Ramos's jaw tightened. He signaled to his team. "Open it." The worker hesitated. "Sir, I don't have—" Ramos cut him off. "Then get me something to pry it open." Moments later, a crowbar scraped against the lock. With a sharp metallic snap, the door creaked open. A wave of thick, sour air rolled out, heavy enough to make one of the younger officers gag and step back. "Jesus Christ," someone muttered, covering his mouth. Ramos steadied his breathing and stepped closer, the beam of his flashlight landing on a stack of cardboard boxes, old furniture, and in the corner, a large blue plastic container, sealed tightly with tape. Flies buzzed around its edges. He crouched beside it, examining the container. "Get the evidence tech down here," he ordered quietly. His voice was steady, but inside something cold pressed against his chest. The officer beside him whispered, "You think—" Ramos didn't answer. Instead, he pointed to the lid. "Cut it open!" A utility knife sliced through the tape with a soft tearing sound. The smell intensified instantly, the unmistakable stench of decay. The officer dropped the knife and stumbled back. Gagging, Ramos closed his eyes briefly, steadying himself, before pulling the lid away. The silence that followed was absolute. Inside the container, beneath layers of plastic and cloth, was the small, still form of a child. Her face was pale, fragile, as if she had simply fallen asleep. A pink hair clip still clung to her dark hair. Ramos felt the world around him slow. His hands trembled slightly, though his face remained expressionless. He reached out and gently lifted a corner of the blanket, revealing a small stuffed toy beside her, a worn-out bunny with one missing ear. "Call it in," he said softly. His voice barely rose above a whisper. The other officers moved mechanically, their radios crackling. "This is Unit Delta 4. We've found remains. Possible child victim. Location: basement storage, Unit 3B. As the report went through, Ramos stood in silence, staring at the tiny hand resting against the side of the container. He'd seen death before, but never like this. Never this quiet. Above them, thunder rumbled faintly, as if echoing from the streets above. Water dripped from a broken pipe, landing in slow, rhythmic drops. Ramos turned toward the stairs. "Seal this area off. No one touches anything until forensics arrives." He climbed the steps one at a time, the beam of his flashlight cutting through the darkness ahead. At the top of the stairs, two officers waited, pale and shaken. One of them spoke, voice trembling. "Sir, should we bring the mother down to identify?" Ramos stopped, his hand tightening on the railing. "No," he said quietly. "Not yet." He looked toward the hallway where Maria sat waiting, unaware of what they had just found. "Bring her to the interrogation room." The metal door closed behind her with a hollow echo, sealing Maria inside a world of cold walls and sharper truths. The air was thick with disinfectant and silence. She sat at the center of the small gray room, a single bulb humming above her head. Her wrists trembled as she folded her hands, trying to stop them from shaking. Detective Ramos entered a moment later, a manila folder tucked beneath his arm. His expression was unreadable, his steps slow, deliberate. He placed the folder on the table and sat across from her. Neither spoke for several seconds. The only sound came from the ticking clock above the door. Ramos finally broke the silence. "Maria," he said softly, "we found something in your storage unit." Maria's eyes flicked up, her lips parting slightly. "My storage?" He nodded, keeping his gaze fixed on her. "Unit 3B, her breathing quickened. She looked away, staring at the corner of the room. What did you find?" Ramos leaned forward, his voice steady but quiet. "You already know what we found." Her shoulders jerked slightly, and she pressed her hands against her mouth as if holding in a scream. Tears welled in her eyes. No, please." "That can't be—" Ramos opened the folder, pulling out a photograph. He didn't slide it across the table. He simply placed it in front of him, out of her reach. "Maria," he said, his voice now firmer, "we found your daughter, Angela." The room went still. Maria's body seemed to fold inward, as if crushed by invisible weight. Her sobs came sharp and broken, echoing off the concrete walls. She clutched at her chest, gasping for breath. "I didn't mean to," she whispered through tears. "I didn't mean to hurt her." Ramos watched her quietly. "Then tell me what happened." Her sobbing quieted. For a moment she stared blankly at the table, at her reflection warped by the metal surface. When she finally spoke, her voice was small, fragile. "She was crying," Maria began. "It was raining that night. She wanted her father. She kept saying his name." Her eyes flickered upward, glassy and lost. "I told her to stop. I told her he didn't love us anymore. She wouldn't stop crying. Ramos didn't interrupt. He just listened, his face calm but his eyes tense. I lost control, Maria continued, voice cracking. I slapped her. Just once. She fell and hit her head. There was blood. Her voice faded into a trembling whisper. I tried to wake her up. I shook her, I called her name, but she didn't move. I didn't know what to do. I panicked. Ramos asked softly, Why didn't you call for help? Maria looked at him then, eyes wide and hollow. Because Ernesto would have blamed me. He always did. He said I was a bad mother. Said I didn't deserve her. She pressed a hand over her mouth. I thought if I hid her, maybe I could think. Maybe I could fix it. The detective's voice dropped lower, almost gentle. So you put her in the container. Maria's head bowed, tears dripping onto the table. I couldn't bury her. I couldn't let anyone take her away. I thought I'd keep her close, just until I figured it out. Silence filled the room again. Ramos leaned back, the chair creaking. Maria, he said after a long pause, we need you to make a formal statement. She didn't respond, just stared ahead, her face pale and distant. After a moment, Ramos stood nodding to the officers outside. As they entered, Maria whispered, Please, don't tell Ernesto. Ramos paused at the door. He already knows, Maria. Her breath caught. He's here? The detective's expression softened. He's on his way. Maria's face turned toward the door as the officers gently guided her up. Her sobs returned, softer now, like someone mourning twice over. Outside, the hallway lights buzzed faintly. Through the narrow window of the interrogation room, the storm had returned, thunder rumbling above the city once more. Maria's voice broke through the quiet as she was led away. I just wanted her to stop crying. The door closed behind her. Detective Ramos stood in silence, staring at the empty chair across from him, the place where truth had finally collapsed. He knew what came next. The storm wasn't over. It was only beginning. The memory came back to her in pieces, the way dreams do when you wake up too fast. Maria sat in the back of the police van, wrists cuffed, staring out through the narrow slits of the window. Rain blurred the lights of Manila, turning them into streaks of color across the glass. Her reflection looked unfamiliar. Hollow eyes, bloodless lips, hair sticking to her damp cheeks. She remembered that week before everything broke. The quiet before the silence. Back then, the apartment had still felt like a home. Angela's laughter had filled the mornings. Soft, high-pitched giggles that made the peeling walls seem less gray. Maria had cooked long breakfasts, humming old Tagalog lullabies while her daughter played with crayons on the floor. But the peace was fragile. It only took one voice to shatter it, Ernesto's voice. He had shown up on a Wednesday unannounced. The sound of his knuckles pounding on the door still echoed in Maria's mind. Angela ran to her mother, whispering, It's Daddy! Maria froze, the color draining from her face. When she opened the door, Ernesto stood there with his familiar smirk, the one that always looked half like love, half like mockery. His shirt was soaked from the rain, his eyes glazed from alcohol. Didn't even invite me to see my daughter? He said, pushing past her. Some wife you are. I'm not your wife anymore, Maria replied quietly. Angela's tiny voice broke the tension. Daddy, look! I made you a picture. She held up a drawing, a stick-figure family with a sun overhead. Ernesto stared at it for a long moment before patting her head. It's nice, he muttered, then turned back to Maria. You think you can keep her from me? You think I'll let you poison her against me? Maria's voice trembled. Please don't start, not in front of her. He laughed bitterly. You always act like the victim. Maybe if you weren't so useless. She slapped him. It wasn't hard, but it was enough. His expression shifted, calm to violent in a blink. He grabbed her wrist, twisting it hard until she winced. Angela screamed, You hit me now? Ernesto hissed. In front of my child? Maria's voice broke. Leave, Ernesto. Please just go. He released her with a shove, eyes burning. You'll regret this, he spat before storming out, slamming the door behind him. For hours after, the apartment sat in tense quiet. Angela hid behind the couch, clutching her toy bunny while Maria sat by the window, trembling. That night, She found her daughter asleep on the floor, still holding the bunny, thumb in her mouth. Maria knelt beside her, stroking her hair, whispering, "I'll protect you, I promise." But promises made in fear are fragile things. The next few days blurred into exhaustion. Maria barely ate. The phone rang constantly, Ernesto's number flashing again and again, but she never answered. She couldn't. She was terrified he'd come back. Then came Angela's nightmares. She started crying at night, waking up screaming for her father. The sound tore at Maria's chest. One evening, Angela refused to eat. She sat by the window, whispering, "Daddy will come get me." Maria's patience cracked. "He's not coming!" she shouted. "He doesn't love us." Angela flinched. Tears welled up in her small eyes. "Don't say that," she cried. "He said he will." Maria sank to her knees, guilt washing over her. "I'm sorry, baby. I'm sorry." She wrapped her arms around her daughter, but Angela pushed her away, running to her room. The door slammed shut. For hours, Maria sat outside that door, whispering apologies into the dark. "I love you," she said. "Please forgive me." But Angela didn't answer. When morning came, the door was still closed and the house was silent. Maria didn't know it then, but that silence, that unbearable empty quiet, was the sound of her world cracking open. In the police van, she blinked hard, pushing the memory away. The rain outside had turned heavier now, hammering against the roof like an accusation. Detective Ramos's voice came faintly through the partition. "We're almost there," he said. Maria didn't respond. She just watched her reflection fade against the glass, her lips barely moving. "I kept my promise," she whispered. No one hurt her again. And in that single sentence lay the storm that was about to come. Thunder rolled across the Manila skyline like distant artillery fire. Sheets of rain battered the windows of the small apartment, drowning the city in a restless roar. Inside, the lights flickered weakly, casting long shadows across the floor. Maria sat at the edge of Angela's bed, brushing strands of wet hair from her daughter's face. The child was restless, turning in her sleep, her small fingers clutching the torn ear of her stuffed bunny. The storm had been raging for hours. Power lines hissed outside, wind howling through the narrow alleys. Every time lightning struck, the apartment flashed white, revealing the peeling walls, the damp curtains, the half-open door to the kitchen where water dripped from the ceiling. Maria's mind was unraveling. Ernesto's voice from days before still echoed in her head. "You'll regret this." Every creak in the hallway, every gust against the window felt like him returning, furious, unstoppable. She hadn't slept in 2 nights. Every sound made her heart lurch. A sudden crash of thunder made Angela stir. "Mama," she whispered, eyes half open, "is Daddy coming?" Maria froze. "No, baby," she said softly. "He's not," Angela frowned, her voice trembling. "But he said he would. He said he'd take me where the rain can't find us." Maria's stomach twisted. "You were dreaming, sweetheart." Angela turned away, curling into herself. "He said you're the reason he left." The words sliced through Maria's chest like a knife. She stood abruptly, backing toward the door. Her breathing quickened. "He doesn't know what he's saying," she muttered. "He doesn't know." The thunder boomed again, louder, closer. Then came a sharp knock at the door. Maria froze. Another knock, heavy, slow. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She tiptoed toward the living room, clutching the wall for balance. The rain had muffled everything, but that sound, that rhythmic pounding, cut through it like a heartbeat. "Who's there?" she whispered. No answer. The knocks came again, harder this time. She stepped closer, voice trembling. "Ernesto?" Silence. Then, a faint scrape, like someone dragging something metal across the hallway floor. Maria's breath caught. Her hand hovered over the lock, trembling. Lightning flashed, illuminating a faint shadow under the door. Boots. She stumbled backward. "Go away!" she screamed, no response, the sound of footsteps retreating. Then nothing. Only the storm. She stood there for what felt like forever, gripping her chest, waiting for another sound. But the hallway was silent now. Slowly, she turned back toward Angela's room. The child was awake, sitting up in bed, tears on her cheeks. Mama, she cried softly, don't let him in. Maria knelt beside her, wrapping her in her arms. Shh, it's okay, baby. No one's coming. I'm here. Angela buried her face in her mother's shoulder, sobbing quietly. The power flickered, then went out completely. The room fell into darkness. Only the dim, pulsing glow of the city outside seeped through the window. Maria reached for a candle on the nightstand and lit it. The small flame danced wildly, casting flickering patterns across the walls. For a while, they sat together in silence, listening to the storm. But something in Angela's breathing began to change, shallow, uneven. "Angela?" Maria whispered, touching her cheek. The little girl was pale, eyes half-lidded. "Baby, are you okay?" Angela coughed weakly. Her forehead was hot, burning. "It hurts, Mama." Maria's panic returned. She touched her daughter's face, then her neck. Sweat, fever. She reached for the phone, but the line was dead. "Hold on," she whispered. "I'll get help." She grabbed her coat, but when she turned toward the door, thunder cracked so loud it shook the building. The lights outside went black. The entire block lost power. Rain poured in through a crack in the window, soaking the floor. Maria dropped to her knees beside Angela again. "Please, please stay with me," she begged. The child's breathing was faint, her skin clammy. Maria rocked her gently, whispering lullabies through tears, trying to drown out the storm outside and the one raging inside her. Then, for a brief moment, everything went quiet. No thunder, no wind, just silence. Maria lifted her head, heart pounding. The candle flickered once, then went out. In the darkness, she thought she heard a voice, low, familiar. "Maria." She froze, clutching Angela close. The sound came again, just outside the door. "Maria." Her breath hitched. Lightning flashed through the window, revealing the door handle slowly turning. Maria screamed, and as thunder exploded above the city, everything went black again. The morning light crept through the blinds like an unwanted memory. The storm had passed, leaving behind a heavy silence that clung to everything. The apartment smelled of damp wood and something else, something metallic, sour, and faintly sweet. Maria stood in the middle of the kitchen, still wearing the same clothes from the night before. Her eyes were red, her face pale. On the counter sat a cracked mug, cold coffee inside, untouched. She looked toward the bedroom door. It was slightly ajar, revealing only darkness beyond. The lullaby she'd whispered hours ago still echoed in her mind, looping endlessly, its comfort now feeling cruel. Her hands shook as she opened the door wider. The air inside was cold, lifeless. Angela's bed was empty. The sheets were tangled, the stuffed bunny lying face down on the floor. For a moment, Maria couldn't breathe. "Angela?" Her voice broke. "Baby, where are you?" No answer. She dropped to her knees, looking under the bed in the closet. Behind the curtain. Nothing. Only the faint dripping sound from the leaking roof and the echo of her heartbeat in her ears. Then her gaze caught the stain on the floorboards near the window. Dark, sticky, almost dry. She froze. Her mind raced backward, to the thunder, the voice, the door handle turning. She remembered holding Angela close, whispering prayers she couldn't finish. Then, blankness. Her eyes filled with tears. "No, no, no." She stumbled to her feet, pacing frantically. "You're okay, baby. You're hiding. You're just hiding." But even as she said it, she knew she was lying to herself. Hours passed. The clock ticked endlessly. The world outside moved on while Maria sat motionless on the floor, her hands stained, her breathing uneven. Then came a knock, not on the apartment door, but on her mind. A memory, sharp and sudden, the storage room downstairs. Maria stood abruptly. Her bare feet slapped against the wet floor as she moved down the narrow hallway, flashlight trembling in her hand. The building's stairwell smelled of rust and mildew. The flickering bulb above cast sickly yellow light on the cracked walls. When she reached the basement, the air grew colder. The hum of the generator was faint, mixed with the distant dripping of rainwater through the ceiling. She pushed open the storage door. It creaked loudly, echoing. Rows of old furniture, broken appliances, and cardboard boxes filled the room. And in the far corner, Partially hidden under a tarp was a large blue plastic container. Maria froze. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. She took one step closer, then another, until she stood directly before it. Mud streaked the sides. The lid was sealed tight with silver duct tape. Her hands trembled as she reached for it. "Please, God," she whispered. "Please let this not be what I think." She peeled the tape slowly. The faint smell grew stronger, acrid and unbearable. She staggered back, pressing her hand over her mouth. Tears streamed down her face. No, I didn't. Her mind replayed fragments of that stormy night. The blackout, the voice, the candle going out. Then nothing but screams swallowed by thunder. Her knees buckled, and she sank to the floor beside the container. "Angela," she sobbed. "What did I do?" The sound of footsteps echoed behind her. Maria whipped around, flashlight shaking wildly. It was the landlord, Mr. Cruz, his expression half curious, half concerned. "Ma'am?" he asked. "Are you all right?" "Someone reported a smell coming from down here." Maria couldn't speak. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Mr. Cruz frowned, stepping closer. "What's in there?" She shook her head violently. Please, don't open it." But he had already reached for the lid. Maria screamed, lunging forward. But he tore off the last strip of tape before she could stop him. The lid fell to the floor with a hollow thud. A heavy silence followed. Mr. Cruz stumbled backward, eyes wide, hand covering his mouth. "Oh my God," he whispered. What did you do?" Maria stared into the container, her body trembling uncontrollably. Her lips quivered, but the words barely escaped. "I was trying to protect her." "I didn't mean—" The flashlight slipped from her hand, rolling across the floor. Mr. Cruz bolted from the room, shouting for help, his voice echoing through the stairwell. Maria didn't move. She sat there in the dim light, staring into the abyss she had created. Outside, the sound of sirens began to grow, distant at first, then closer. She closed her eyes, whispering to no one, "She's still here. I can still feel her." The sirens wailed louder, their red lights bleeding through the cracks of the basement door, and as the first police boots thundered down the stairs, Maria reached for the container again, her trembling hand resting gently on its cold edge. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Mama's here now." The basement was sealed with yellow tape before sunrise. By the time the first morning rays broke through the clouds, Maria had already been handcuffed, her wrists trembling against the cold steel. The sound of officers murmuring filled the air, words like remains, evidence, mother, and motive. But Maria heard none of it. She sat in the back of the patrol car, staring blankly out the window as raindrops streaked down the glass. Her reflection looked unfamiliar, pale, hollow, almost translucent. 9 days. That's how long she had convinced herself everything was fine. 9 days since Angela had gone quiet. 9 days of whispering to the empty room, setting a plate of food on the table, humming lullabies to no one. She'd lived those days suspended between guilt and madness, building a world where her daughter was only sleeping, where nothing irreversible had happened. Inside her mind, denial had been her only refuge. The officers spoke in hushed tones outside the vehicle. One of them, Officer Ramos, removed his cap and sighed. "She kept her here all this time?" The detective beside him shook his head. Maybe she couldn't let go. Maria's eyes flicked toward them, but she said nothing. Her hands were clasped so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She rocked slightly, whispering to herself, "She's still here. She's not gone." As the car began to move, the city blurred past in shades of gray. People on sidewalks stared as the sirens wailed through traffic. The world, Maria thought, had continued spinning, while hers had stopped 9 days ago. At the station, reporters had already gathered. Flashes erupted as she was led inside, her head bowed. Questions flew like bullets. "Why did you do it, Maria? Was it an accident? Where's the father?" She didn't respond. The words didn't belong to her world anymore. Inside the holding cell, the silence was unbearable. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the air, steady and cold. Maria sat on the narrow bench, eyes fixed on the wall. 9 days. She remembered each one. Day 1, the night of the storm. Angela's fever. The blackout. The scream that wasn't hers. Day 2, the quiet. The stillness in the morning light. The way the house felt different, emptier. Day 3, she'd cleaned. Scrubbed the floor until her fingers bled, pretending it was just spilled juice. Day 4, she'd sung to the empty bed, hoping her daughter would answer. Day 5, she stopped eating. Day 6, the smell began. She told herself it was just the rain seeping into the walls. A neighbor knocked, asking if she was okay. She smiled, said Angela was sleeping. Discretion. She began hearing whispers again, the same voice from the storm, calling her name through the cracks in the night. Day 9. Mr. Cruz found the container. Each day had been a step deeper into a world she couldn't escape. Now, in the cell, Maria felt the weight of those days pressing on her chest like a physical burden. She reached into her pocket, fingers brushing against something cold, a small hair clip. Angela's. She must have grabbed it without realizing, her eyes filled with tears. "I was supposed to protect you," she whispered. The cell door opened. Detective Inez entered, holding a file. Her face was unreadable, her tone measured. "Maria," she said softly, "we need to talk." Maria didn't move. The detective sat across from her, laying out photos on the table. Angela's school picture, the apartment, the container, the basement. Each image was a mirror to her failure. "I know you loved her," Inez said, "but we need to understand what happened." "Please help us." Maria's lips trembled. She was sick. She was burning up. "I tried to help. The storm, it was dark. I couldn't see." Her voice cracked. Then she stopped breathing, she whispered, her eyes distant. "I held her and I thought if I stayed still long enough, maybe she'd start again." Inez leaned forward. "You didn't call anyone?" Maria shook her head violently. "The phone was dead. The whole city was dark. I couldn't lose her too." "Too?" Inez repeated quietly. Maria hesitated. Her eyes darted away. "Her father, he left. He said I was the reason everything fell apart." The detective noted something in her pad. "So you kept her with you? Even after—" Maria's breathing quickened. She wasn't gone. Not really. I could feel her heartbeat at night. I swear I could. The detective exhaled slowly, closing the file. "Maria, denial can make the mind see what it wants to see." Maria looked up sharply. "No, you don't understand." "She talked to me." Inez said nothing. Tears streamed down Maria's face. "I heard her every night. She said she wasn't ready to go." Silence fell. The hum of the lights filled the void between them. The detective finally stood. "We'll continue this tomorrow." As she walked out, Maria pressed the hair clip to her chest, rocking gently. "She's not gone," she whispered again, almost smiling. "She just needs me to find her." The door shut behind her, leaving only the sound of her breath in the empty cell, steady, fragile, and fading. The rain had finally stopped, but the street still glistened like glass under the faint orange glow of the streetlights. The city was just waking up when the police arrived at Building 47. Neighbors peeked through half-open curtains, their silhouettes frozen, whispers curling through the damp morning air. Detective Inez stood at the base of the stairwell, the smell of mildew thick in the air. Her boots echoed against the concrete as she motioned to her team. "Room 3B, she said quietly. "Go slow." The officers nodded, weapons drawn, radios crackling. They ascended the steps one by one, their breathing controlled, tense. Inside the apartment, Maria sat by the window. The candle she'd lit hours earlier had melted down to a puddle of wax, its small flame flickering beside an untouched cup of tea. She had changed into a clean blouse, white, ironed, almost ceremonial. Her hair was combed, pinned neatly behind her ears. She looked calm. Her eyes drifted toward the street below, where red and blue lights pulsed rhythmically across the wet pavement. For a moment she thought of Angela, how she used to press her small hands against that same window, watching the city lights before bed. Maria whispered softly, "Look, baby." "They came for us." A knock echoed through the door. 3 times. Firm, final. "Mrs. Alvarez." a voice called from the hallway. "This is Detective Inez. Please open the door." Maria didn't move. The sound seemed distant, muffled, like she was underwater. The knock came again, louder. "Maria, open the door, please." She finally rose, her bare feet silent on the cold floor. For a brief moment, she caught her reflection in the cracked mirror near the door. Her face looked older, drained, hollowed out by sleepless nights and grief. She barely recognized herself. The knob turned slowly, and the door opened to reveal the detective and two uniformed officers. Maria looked at them as though they were strangers from another world. "Maria," Inez said gently. "You know why we're here." Maria's voice was soft, distant. "Yes, I've been waiting." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. Inez took a step forward, lowering her tone. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in a court of law." Maria barely listened. Her gaze drifted toward the photograph on the wall, Angela in her school uniform, smiling, two missing front teeth. That smile had once been her reason to live. Now, it was all that remained of her. As Inez recited the rites, Maria spoke quietly over her voice. "She was my everything. Do you understand that?" Inez paused. "I do. No, you don't." Maria's tone sharpened. "You think I hurt her? But I didn't. I was saving her." One of the officers moved closer, cuffing her wrists carefully. The metal clinked softly, a sound that cut through the silence like a blade. Maria didn't resist. Her eyes remained fixed on the photo. "I couldn't let the world take her like it took him. I couldn't." Inez's expression softened, but her voice remained steady. "Maria, no one was trying to take her." Maria turned slowly to face her. "You think so? You didn't see what I saw?" The night he came back. The way he whispered through the door. Inez frowned. "You mean your husband? Ernesto Alvarez?" Maria nodded slowly, her voice trembling. "He was there that night. The thunder, the knocking, I heard him. He wanted her. He said he'd take her away." The detective glanced toward her team, exchanging a silent look that blended pity with disbelief. "Maria," Inez said softly, "Ernesto's been gone for 2 years. He couldn't have been there." Maria's eyes widened, confusion breaking across her face. No, that's not true. He was there. I heard him. I smelled his cologne." He said, her words dissolved into a whisper. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "He said I wasn't a good mother." Nez placed a hand on her shoulder. "We'll talk more at the station." As they led her down the narrow staircase, neighbors crowded at their doors, clutching their robes and whispering prayers. Flashbulbs erupted outside as the press swarmed the building. "Maria, why did you do it? Was it revenge? Do you regret it?" Maria blinked at the flashing lights, dazed. For a second, she thought she saw Angela standing among the crowd, tiny, barefoot, her hair blowing softly in the wind. She smiled faintly. "She's here," Maria murmured. Inez heard her and looked back. "Who's here, Maria?" Maria's lips trembled. "My little girl." "She's waiting for me." As they guided her into the police car, Maria turned one last time toward the apartment building. Through the rain-smeared window, she could still see the flicker of candlelight from her room, the last trace of the world she'd built in her denial. When the car door shut, the sound echoed like a final heartbeat. Inez watched as the vehicle pulled away, her jaw tight, her eyes following the red taillights until they vanished into the misty dawn. She exhaled slowly and whispered to herself, "Now comes the hard part, the truth." The room was small, windowless, and cold. A single light hung from the ceiling, casting a pale circle over the metal table. Maria sat on one side, wrists still red from the handcuffs, a paper cup of water untouched before her. The hum of the air vent was the only sound until the door opened. Detective Inez entered, holding a manila folder and a small black recorder. She placed both on the table, her movements slow and deliberate. "We're going to record this, Maria," she said quietly. "For the record." "Do you understand?" Maria nodded, her eyes unfocused. Inez pressed the red button. The tape clicked. The small reels began to spin. "State your name," Inez said. "Maria Alvarez." And do you understand you are being questioned in connection to the disappearance and presumed death of your daughter, Angela Alvarez? Maria hesitated, her fingers twitching. She's not gone. You don't understand. She's waiting. Inez's voice remained steady. Maria, Angela's been missing for 9 days. Her belongings were found in the apartment. The neighbors heard screaming that night. Help me understand what happened. Maria looked up, her eyes glassy. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me, Inez said. Silence stretched for a full 10 seconds before Maria finally spoke. It was the storm. The night it started. She was afraid of the thunder, so she came into my room. I held her. Told her everything would be okay. She paused, her voice trembling. But then I heard him. Ernesto. He was whispering from the hallway again. Inez leaned forward. Ernesto's been dead for 2 years. Buried in St. Mary's. Maria shook her head violently. No, he was there. I heard his voice. He said he'd take her like he took me, like he took our peace. Inez's pen froze. What do you mean, like he took you? Maria's breathing quickened. He used to lock me in the bathroom. Said I needed to be quiet so Angela wouldn't hear us fight. But she always did. She always heard. She looked straight at the recorder as if speaking directly to someone unseen. That night when I heard him again, I thought he came for her. I had to protect her. The tape crackled softly. What did you do, Maria? Inez asked. Maria closed her eyes. I told her to stay quiet, to hide under the bed, but she wouldn't listen. She kept crying, saying she was scared. The thunder was so loud I couldn't think. I just wanted it to stop. Her voice began to crumble. I covered her mouth to keep her quiet. Just for a moment. Just until the storm passed. I swear I didn't mean to hurt her. The words hung in the air like smoke. Inez's pen fell from her hand. You covered her mouth? Maria nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. When I took my hand away, she wasn't moving. Her eyes were open, but she wasn't there anymore. The detective's throat tightened. What did you do then? Maria looked down at her trembling hands. I panicked. I tried to wake her, but she was gone. The thunder wouldn't stop. I wrapped her in the blanket and held her all night. Inez closed her eyes, struggling to maintain composure. And the container, Maria? What was inside it? Maria's voice cracked. I couldn't bury her. I couldn't let the world take her. So I kept her close. I thought if I prayed hard enough, she'd wake up. Like before. Like in my dreams. The tape continued spinning, recording every fractured whisper. Maria, Inez said softly, why didn't you call anyone? Maria's face twisted in anguish. Because they'd think I was a monster. But I'm not. I loved her. I just wanted her to be safe. Inez sat back, silent for a long moment. Then she spoke carefully. Maria, this recording will be used in court. Do you understand what you've just admitted to? Maria nodded faintly. It doesn't matter. She forgave me already. I can hear her at night. She hums her favorite song. Inez glanced at the recorder. The red light blinked steadily, almost accusingly. Maria, she said softly, is that why you lit the candles every night? Maria smiled weakly. She's afraid of the dark. The tape continued rolling, filling the room with the faint sound of Maria's sobs. Inez finally reached forward and pressed stop. The soft click echoed like a gunshot in the stillness. For a long time, neither woman moved. The faint hum of the vent returned, and with it the weight of truth, ugly, irreversible, and suffocating. Finally, Inez stood and gathered the recorder. This will be the last time we talk tonight, she said quietly. You'll be transferred in the morning. Maria looked up, her eyes distant. Will they let me see her? Inez hesitated. In your own way. Maybe. As Inez left the room, the light flickered. Maria stared at the mirror on the wall. Behind it, the other officers watched silently, shaken. Then, in the faint hum of the silence, came a sound no one could explain. A soft child's voice, barely a whisper, humming a lullaby. Maria smiled through her tears. Told you, she whispered. She's still here. The courthouse was packed before the sun even rose. Journalists filled the hallways, their cameras flashing at every movement, every whisper. The name Maria Alvarez had spread across the country like wildfire. The grieving mother who became the unthinkable headline. Inside courtroom 4B, the air was heavy, silent. The faint shuffle of papers and the tapping of pens were the only sounds breaking through the tension. Maria sat at the defense table wearing a plain gray dress, her wrists resting motionless on her lap. Her face looked pale, her eyes hollowed by nights without sleep. Across from her, the prosecution team organized a stack of exhibits, photographs, medical reports, and most importantly, the black recorder labeled Evidence 23C, the confession tape. When Judge Reynolds entered, the room rose in unison. His expression was stern but tired, as if he had already carried the weight of this tragedy for months. "Court is now in session," he said. "State versus Maria Alvarez." The prosecutor, a sharp-voiced woman named Helen Grant, stood. "Your Honor, this case is about a mother who crossed the line between love and madness. We will show how Maria Alvarez took her daughter's life, not out of malice, but out of delusion. And while that may evoke sympathy, it does not absolve guilt." Her words echoed through the courtroom. Maria didn't flinch. She stared down at her hands, her mind drifting to the faint melody that still haunted her. Angela's lullaby. When the defense attorney, Daniel Cruz, rose, his tone was calm, almost fragile. "Maria Alvarez is not a monster," he said. "She is a broken woman, a victim of years of psychological abuse, isolation, and untreated trauma. This was not murder. It was tragedy born from fear." The jury listened, unmoving. Some looked at Maria. Others looked away. The first witness was Detective Inez. She took the stand, her posture straight, but her eyes heavy. The prosecutor began, "Detective, can you confirm that you recorded the confession of the defendant on March 18th? "Yes," Inez replied softly. "It was voluntary. She was informed of her rights. Did she ever deny her actions?" "No. She admitted to covering her daughter's mouth until she stopped breathing." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Maria's shoulders tensed, but she didn't lift her head. Then came the moment everyone was waiting for. The prosecutor lifted the recorder. "Your Honor, the state requests to play Exhibit 23C. The judge nodded. "Proceed." The sound of the tape filled the courtroom. Maria's trembling voice, her sobs, her words. "I just wanted her to be safe." Every second stretched unbearably. By the time it ended, several jurors looked visibly shaken. Helen Grant turned to the jury. "Those are not the words of an innocent woman. They are the words of a killer rationalizing her crime." Daniel Cruz rose immediately. "Objection, Your Honor. Argument, not evidence." "Sustained," the judge said. Cruz walked to the center of the courtroom. "You heard her voice," he said softly. "You heard a mother drowning in grief and delusion. Does that sound like premeditation? Or like a mind that finally broke under the weight of its own terror?" He then called his witness, Dr. Celine Hart, a forensic psychologist. "Dr. Hart, in your professional opinion, was Maria Alvarez capable of understanding the consequences of her actions that night?" Dr. Hart adjusted her glasses. "No, she was not. Based on my evaluation, she suffered from severe post-traumatic stress disorder and psychotic depression." Her mind fractured. In her delusion, she believed she was protecting her child from an imagined threat. The prosecutor interjected sharply, "So you're saying murder is excusable because of delusion?" Dr. Hart replied calmly, "I'm saying her intent was protection, not harm. The difference matters." The courtroom fell silent again. From her seat, Maria whispered to herself, "I saved her. I saved her." Judge Reynolds glanced toward her, his expression softening for just a moment before returning to formality. "Mrs. Alvarez, please remain silent during proceedings." The hours passed slowly, filled with testimonies, objections, and the heavy rhythm of heartbreak replayed in words and evidence. By afternoon, the air inside the courtroom had grown stifling. As the session neared its end, Daniel Cruz stood one last time. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he said, voice trembling slightly, "Maria Alvarez is not asking for your forgiveness. She's asking for your understanding. The law must punish, yes, but it must also see. And sometimes what it sees is a mother who lost everything long before the act itself." Helen Grant stood immediately after. "And sometimes," she countered, "what the law sees is a victim who can no longer speak for herself. A child who deserved to live. Remember her voice, Not her mother's excuses. The judge called for adjournment. Court will resume tomorrow morning for closing statements. As the gavel struck, Maria lifted her head for the first time that day. Through the haze of faces and flashing cameras, she thought she saw a small figure near the courtroom doors, a little girl in a yellow dress, smiling faintly. Maria's lips trembled. "Angela," she whispered. But when she blinked, the space was empty. The bailiff placed a gentle hand on her arm, guiding her away. Outside, thunder rolled again in the distance, the first storm since that night. Night had fallen over the city, blanketing the courthouse in silence. The storm that began earlier had grown heavier, rain streaking down the windows like endless tears. Inside the detention wing, Maria Alvarez sat alone in her cell, her hands clasped tightly, her lips trembling as she whispered words no one else could hear. The faint hum of the fluorescent light above flickered, throwing shadows across the gray walls. Her reflection stared back from the metal table, hollow-eyed, fragile, unrecognizable. She pressed her palms together, her breath unsteady. "Father," she whispered, "forgive me." Outside, the hallway echoed with the footsteps of a guard making rounds. The clatter of keys broke the stillness for a moment before fading again. Maria stayed still, her gaze distant, her prayer deepening. "I know what I did. I know what I took from this world," she murmured. But she was crying. She was so afraid. "I thought I was saving her. I thought—" Her voice cracked, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Why didn't you stop me?" A distant rumble of thunder answered her, followed by a flash of lightning that illuminated her cell. For a moment, the light reflected off the small photo on the table, a picture of Angela smiling in her yellow dress, her tiny hand clutching a balloon. The edges of the photo were worn, creased from years of being held. Maria reached for it, her thumb brushing gently over the image. "I still hear her," she whispered. "Every night. She calls my name." A soft sound echoed behind her, the faint click of a door unlocking. The guard appeared briefly, placing a tray of food on the small table outside her cell. "Dinner," he muttered, avoiding her eyes. She didn't move toward it. Instead, she lowered herself to the cold floor, knees pressing against the concrete. Her hands tightened around the photo. "Hail Mary, full of grace," she began, her voice quivering. Each word came out like a confession, slow, deliberate, aching. When the prayer ended, silence filled the cell once more. The storm outside had grown violent now, wind howling against the building as rain battered the glass. Somewhere down the hall, another inmate screamed in her sleep. Maria closed her eyes, her breathing deepening. For a fleeting moment, she imagined herself somewhere else, back in the small apartment, sunlight streaming through the curtains, Angela's laughter echoing through the room. "Mommy, can you play with me?" Maria smiled faintly. "Always, baby, always." The sound was so vivid that she opened her eyes in surprise. The cell looked the same, gray walls, steel bars, but she could have sworn she heard footsteps, light and hurried, like a child running barefoot down a hallway. "Angela?" she whispered. No answer. Only the hum of the light above and the soft patter of rain. Her heart pounded. "If you're here, please, tell me you're safe." Something inside her, something deep and fragile, broke open. She pressed her forehead to the floor, clutching the photo to her chest. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "For everything. For the nights I screamed. For the fear I put in your eyes. For the moment I forgot that love doesn't mean holding on. It means letting go." Minutes passed. The storm roared. Her tears pooled beneath her, small reflections of the flickering light above. Then, softly, almost imperceptibly, she began to hum. The same lullaby she once sang to Angela before bed. The melody trembled but never broke. Each note filled the room like a ghost, wrapping her in bittersweet warmth. She sang until her voice grew hoarse, until exhaustion overtook her body. Then she lay on the floor, her head resting against the wall, her fingers still holding the photo. In the distance, the church bell struck midnight. Maria turned her gaze toward the small slit of window high above her bed. Through it, she could see only a fragment of the sky, black and trembling with rain. "Please," she whispered again, barely audible. "If there's mercy left for me, let it find her first." The thunder rolled again, softer now, almost fading. Moments later, the door to her cell opened again. The guard stepped in, rain dripping from his coat. "You have a visitor," he said quietly. Maria looked up, her eyes swollen, confused. "At this hour?" He hesitated before answering. "It's your mother." Her lips parted in shock. "My mother?" The guard nodded. 5 minutes. Maria slowly pushed herself up from the floor. Her legs trembled, but she steadied herself. She wiped her face with the sleeve of her dress, tucked Angela's photo gently into her pocket, and followed him out. As she walked down the corridor, the storm's sound faded behind her. Each step echoed against the concrete walls, slow, deliberate, heavy. At the end of the hallway, behind a glass partition, stood an old woman with gray hair and eyes filled with sorrow. Maria stopped. For the first time in years, she felt like a child again, small, broken, seen. Her mother raised her hand to the glass, whispering something Maria couldn't hear. Maria pressed her own hand against it, trembling. "Pray with me," her mother mouthed through the glass. And for the first time since Angela's death, Maria closed her eyes and did.